if you're on a date with Leia Sadu, you're not like
Talking.
you're not getting on the bus. You're not talking. You're not saying a goddamn word. You're just sipping a black coffee on a fucking boat that's going to Russia for some reason.
1, 2, 3, 4. These boys only want the best stuff. They want the cream of the crop. They don't want none of that Michael Bay shit. They want the shit that pops. Oscar bait, black and white. Maybe something French. If it's got more than one explosion, honey, put that shit on the bench.
You're the first, you're the last, my everything.
Welcome to Oscar Wieners,
Hey,
the only show on the internet where Hollywood's biggest night needs to stop eating so much meat and needs to eat a little bit more bean curd so that its turds are smoother from the curd.
cut back on the beef.
I am Tool Peterson.
Cool. And I'm Emperor Penguin.
Really good.
Yeah.
I'm Michael Ezander, actually.
Yeah, sorry.
And this is Oscar Wieners, already said that, a podcast where every week we pick a best picture. Did I say this already?
Say it again. Fuck it.
Where every week we pick a best picture winner at random and try to figure out if the best picture worthy.
Cleaned.
And this week we're talking about Bernardo Bertolucci's 1988 Best Picture winner, The Last Emperor.
An Italian man.
An Italian making a movie about Chinese history.
Cool.
This is a movie about the last emperor of China.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's born in like 1905. So the movie starts in 1908. He's a 3-year-old boy. His name is Puyi. He's played by various actors.
Yeah.
Richard Vu
shows his whole life.
Yeah, Richard Vu at 3 years old. Tijer So at 8 years old. Wu Tao at 15 years old. And finally, John Lone as an adult. I'm also sorry for my probably endless pronunciations in this episode. So Puyi's the last emperor of China. And it sort of follows him over the course of basically his whole life. Follows him over the course of his whole life.
Yeah.
It's sort of a bifurcated narrative. It's like jumping around in different times. Like he's there's a point when he's like in his like 50s and he goes to this like communist like re-education camp for Chinese citizens who like assisted Japan during the war. Then it's cutting to flashbacks when he's a kid, because he's as an adult he's like, they're like, write your life story so that you can then reform based on our interpretation of your life story or whatever.
It'd be cool if it was in a game show style format, I think.
It is kind of Slumdog Millionaire-esque. I did not choose the movie intentionally, but I also couldn't help seeing parallels.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's about, Puyi growing up in a time where like basically the emperorship is sort of being phased out. I think China is they're establishing like a republic.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because obviously as a child, he doesn't really have a grasp on what emperorship is. And as the idea of the emperor evolves into basically being phased out, even the people around him don't really know what it means to be emperor. So it's like just a bunch of people kind of clueless together. They're almost exhibiting this childlike sense of like, we don't know what the emperor does anymore. Our lives are changing too.
That's a really good point. It's basically by the time Puyi is like 8 years old, it's like, oh yeah, you're like emperor kind of like as like it's sort of like a more of like an honorary or sort of like symbolic thing, but you actually have no sway over like the direction of the country. But you guys are all going to be, you and the hundreds of people who like work for you are just going to be sequestered in the Forbidden City and just kind of hang out. But you
Yeah.
can't leave.
Oh, can't leave. And he finds out the hard way. His brother comes to visit him after what, 7 years or something like that.
Yeah.
It was basically like, you can't tell me what to do. You're not even the emperor. And he's like, what do you mean? It's like, well, we got a new guy and he's a president or whatever, and he's got way more power and he's got a fucking car. What do you have?
He's like, what do I have? Hey, guy over there, one of my eunuch guys,
Yeah.
drink this green ink. And you know
What
what?
a massive.
That guy does.
He does. He just chugs the ink. And just takes him just a huge L.
He lets this fucking 8-year-old force him to drink ink.
That sucks. Like that's
power.
I mean, in a lot of ways, this movie is about power, or at least like the power or the difference between power and agency.
Yeah.
Because ironically, as much power as he has as the emperor, he can't fucking leave. And I like how they touch on that multiple times throughout the film. Like, earlier as a child, he wants to leave the city walls, and they're like, "Oh, we won't let you." And he's kind of confused at this. But even like as an older teenager or young adult, he again tries to leave, and they're like, "No." And he's like, what's the point of this? Again, I'm being barred from leaving. He has no real agency over his own life, which I thought was an interesting dynamic.
And just like the juxtaposition of, yeah, everybody acknowledges you are the final emperor of China. It's like you'll have a 10,000-year reign, I think is what they say. But just but then it's like, what do you mean you want to leave the Forbidden City? Are you nuts?
Stupid. Crazy.
Hello.
Dum-dum.
Why don't you put on your dunce cap? And it's just like that it's so. Do you like this movie? What was your experience watching this movie?
Oh. Some movies have twisted endings.
Yeah, big time.
The twist at the end of this movie is that there's another 45 minutes left. It's long. This guy's long.
It's a long movie.
When you have a movie that's clocking in at nearly 3 hours, you gotta have some juice to it. And I think the source of juice here is the soundtrack / score, because that rips. They got Ryuichi Sakamoto teaming up with David Byrne, and that owns bones. The music in this is really good. Ryuichi also decided that he also has to be in the movie for some reason.
I saw him in like the credits on like the cast part, and I was like, wait, he's also in it?
He is, I can't think of his position or his name, which is great research on my end, but he is overseeing this Japanese state in China that he wants Puyi to come in and basically become emperor again, as almost like a puppet emperor.
Right.
And he jumps at that chance because he's missing a certain sense of like, maybe I can finally find agency, and he doesn't ultimately. He's still like shoehorned place to place and finds that he doesn't know or have the ability to do anything.
That's what's so interesting about that section is like, and even the way when it cuts back to him in like the re-education sort of tension center, they're like the guards and the whatever interrogators, whatever you want to call them, are like, and like the warden or whatever, they're like, what do you mean? Because in his like memoir, he's like, yeah, I was forced to assist the Japanese. And they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You did all of this like with agency. And I think it's so interesting, like the disconnect of like, he wanted agency so bad that he was willing to give up just more freedom to have sort of like fake agency. And like, he's unable to process that he did that, and like it's almost like he's lying to himself, because he's like, well, you don't know the whole story of like what I went through as a boy. And it's almost like the movie is giving context of like, here's why a man might do that,
right?
Like it's not, not like necessarily like letting him off the hook, but it's just sort of like, yeah, this this is what he did and why he did it. Again, I don't know if this movie's like super historically accurate.
One thing that's so crucial about a historical movie like this is if you can take a piece of history and make it interesting, I think that's really valuable. And in my head, I'm like, okay, I think they did that as long as it is, and some it lacks a certain emotional oomph to it, and there are times when you really do feel the runtime, but at least I walk away learning something. And then I looked up, I was like, okay, how historically accurate is The Last Emperor? And turns out not very much. In terms of the events, a lot of them did happen, but it seemed to me, I get the sense that who Puyi was, or at least how he's portrayed in the film, is not like how he was in real life. He was a lot harsher, a lot less sympathetic in real life. The romance in the movie was greatly exaggerated, apparently. It's, not really clear how his relationships were with his wife or his concubine. It seemed like he was very distant, very aloof. And if you're a movie like this that's a historical piece, if you're not going to be historically accurate, what's the point of you? Like, right? Like, who is this? Who do you think this movie is for? It's not a family movie. It's not a date night movie. It's not a movie you want to go see in theaters. What's the point? Who's your audience?
I love this movie. I think it's great.
Oh, shit. Okay, big dog. Speak your truth.
Here's the, that is interesting.
I should. Sorry, I'm just gonna cut you off real quick. I don't hate this movie. I did like this movie. I think it's just very flawed. Is all.
Got it. Yeah, like speaking of historical accuracy, like I don't know, just hearing that, I'm like, does this movie need to be historically accurate? Like, I do get what you're saying, because you're like, well, if it's a movie about history, like, you should kind of stick to the facts. But then
I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm saying if you're not going to have a lot of emotional interest or characters that feel compelling, you better at least be accurate in teaching me a historical lesson.
Oh, okay.
That's the only way I'm willing to concede that.
Right. See, I think maybe that's where we differ, because I actually was emotionally invested in this movie.
Okay.
And in Puyi's plight. I agree that the movie's a little long.
Yeah.
Could maybe be like half an hour shorter, 45 minutes shorter, but at the same time, like, you kind of, with a historical epic like this, you kind of want it to be, you want that time with the character to watch, like, him just, like, over the course of his life. Like, I'm thinking about Oppenheimer. They're kind of nothing alike, although I guess, like, Oppenheimer is sort of about, like, how much is this guy culpable in what happened after he made this, like, thing.
Right.
And, like I think what I love about The Last Emperor is it reminds me, my feelings about this movie remind me of what you said in the King's Speech episode about, like, should we be critical of a movie that's about, like, the most powerful person in theory in a country, like monarchy and, like, all that stuff. And then like we kind of talked about in that episode about, like, well, if it wasn't about a monarch, we wouldn't be talking about it. This story. And it reminded, like, with this movie, I think by making, I feel like I touched on it a little bit, but by making, obviously not making, Puyi was an emperor on paper. By this guy being emperor and then turning the history and making, like, taking the history and making this movie about how, like, you can be on paper, like, the most powerful or famous person in, like, a country or in the world, but just like everybody else, you're going to be forgotten. And, like, ultimately, the tide of history is way too powerful for you to actually, even if you do have agency over your life, the tide of history is exponentially more powerful than you are. So whatever power you do exert, even in your time, will just get fucking washed away. Systems will change, new leaders will come in, people will fucking have wars over some other bullshit, and it's like everybody just walks over your bones under the ground and like has no idea
That's
you were ever
metal.
here to begin with. And I think the movie I think is so clever. I mean, you know, how you're saying it's not really historically accurate. Like I think it's actually even more clever to find that kind of what to me feels like a universal story in this like very, you know, fucking like it'd be very easy to look at the Puyi and be like, fuck this guy. Like what?
Yeah.
He had
Yeah.
like he had like 10 miles of just like fucking, I don't know how big the Forbidden City is. He had a huge just acres of just like this place to himself, and he could just kind of like he didn't have to want for anything. But I think when the movie, what like, you know, the movie being about like powerlessness and how like, you know, we are kind of powerless against like history's, you know, the course of history, I think it's kind of why I love this movie. I think it's like a really beautiful movie about that.
I like that a lot. I hadn't considered that angle. And you're right. History will trot on your bones. It doesn't matter if you're a peasant or an emperor.
Yeah.
The passage of time will flatten you like an elephant flattening a tiny little mouse that is a secret and I keep in my pocket. That's kind of. Do you think that's intimidating, or do you think that's a? I think it's kind of beautiful.
Sometimes that thought gives me the horrors, I'll call them.
Sure.
And sometimes it gives me the tinglies in a good way.
Okay. All right.
Like sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, we're all part of like, you know, none of us will be remembered, and yeah, that is kind of beautiful. We're on, you know, a fucking rock floating through space. The cosmos is infinite. None of it matters.
Does it change your mind if I remind you that this child breastfed until he was about 14 years old? Does that affect you in any way?
I think that's cool and good. I don't know.
Got it. Got it. Do you like the romance in this movie? Because I thought it was interesting up until I found out it was largely exaggerated.
Yeah, I did like. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. I thought the idea of having a threesome as the world burns down around you was pretty tight.
Yeah.
Disagree or
No, that's pretty sick.
yeah. I don't really have much else to say about that actually.
Got it.
No, he meets his wife basically on their wedding day, right?
Yeah,
It's
like
marriage.
arranged marriage. Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because it's another example of his lack of agency in his life because he doesn't have any control over who he's marrying. He even says himself, you know, he's embarrassed. He says it to Peter O'Toole, who's his Scottish teacher or tutor. But the relationship ends up being nice at first. And they really like each other and have certain chemistry.
Even their first scene together, like where they're supposed to like have sex, I guess, like after they're married, is kind of sweet.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
she's like, don't worry, don't like no pressure.
Yeah, and she keeps like kissing him and he's in like utter ecstasy.
Yeah.
And like people servants start like pulling their clothes off.
That's a reason to be emperor. For someone to just undo your dockers for you.
I need to unbutton your dockers.
That's the beauty of being emperor.
Who you couldn't even think about. Like he didn't even know dockers were coming.
No one did. Not even as he was coming.
He was thinking about dockers while he was fucking climaxing.
They should have had like a sick twist in this movie where like he invents some insane, just like totally trivial item. Like they should just have him be like the founder of Levi Jeans or something.
Like Forrest Gump. It's
yeah.
like,
Like if you're gonna be inaccurate, at least be wildly inaccurate. You know what I
Like, what
mean?
if in the 50s he just like met Elvis for some reason?
That would be so cool. That would be awesome.
So like the first like maybe like hour of this movie, maybe 45 minutes is I think it's actually the toughest section to get through because it's him as like a little kid and like slowly kind of aging into like 14 years old.
Interesting. I think the opposite, but okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
For me it was the toughest just because I was like, I mean, the kid's cute and he's running around and he's eating bean curd and taking smooth shits in a pepper.
Yeah.
But I think the movie gets way better as he is older and can understand that he doesn't have agency. And then like that's when
Yeah.
Peter O'Toole comes in and starts tutoring him. And even like sorry, go ahead.
Do we know why he comes in? Because he has a tutor, but then they bring in some Scottish guy.
He might have demanded it, I wonder, like Puyi. He might have been like
Interesting. Okay. That's
because I think an interesting thread in the movie, I love when movies kind of like have like stuff just sort of in the mix, but it's never like an official point is never being made. It's just sort of like, yeah, this is kind of like an interesting like flavor to the movie because like it seems like Puyi really what he really connects, it seems, to like Western kind of modes of like politics and
yeah.
And I think that's partly why he brings in Peter O'Toole, who obviously is from the UK, and then Peter O'Toole like kind of westernizes Puyi
Totally.
even more because like obviously he's teaching him he's kind of teaching him like how to be like a good Scotsman, but
Yeah,
like
gives him a bicycle,
yeah,
which
get
is kind of
glasses.
Yeah, get some glasses.
And I think the Peter O'Toole section is interesting too because like the more I thought about it, like it's interesting because at first when at least when I was watching, I'm like, oh, Peter O'Toole is the only character who's not using Puyi. If anything, he's pointing out to Puyi that like everybody who works for him, he's like, yeah, they're all stealing from you. Like especially since you were a kid, they were just like stealing shit because like you wouldn't care because you're like 5 years old or whatever.
Yeah.
But Peter O'Toole is who he gets Puyi to like fire all of his like eunuch servants.
Right.
And like on one hand, it's good because he's not being taken advantage of, Puyi. But then it's like, oh, but he's like sort of Peter O'Toole is like getting in there, westernizing Puyi and being like, hey, you're a support unit for your whole life. You should get rid of them and kind of be like more on your own.
Right.
It's like it's like Puyi then like it's like the movie gets smaller as it goes on because it's like Puyi starts with like this large community and then it's like he westernizes and gets even more isolated. And it's like, is that good?
Do you think their relationship is genuine? Because it turns out by the end, at least from what I could pick up, it seems like he was using him. Because eventually he writes his book. Yeah.
That's the other thing too. It's like, yeah, you think Peter O'Toole is looking out for him and standing up for this kid who he feels like is being, taken advantage of and is like being like, it's so interesting because like Peter O'Toole thinks Puyi is being isolated because he's being kept inside the Forbidden City. He has Puyi fire everybody who he's known all his life, and then he becomes more isolated inside the Forbidden City.
Yeah.
And then eventually he breaks out. But like, yeah, and then Peter O'Toole writes the book about him, and it's like, yeah, he was just kind of. It seems like he was just like, oh, it would be like really interesting to write a book about this guy.
And then he just fully threw him under the bus. He was basically like, yeah, he did collaborate with Japan and was under their control. Meanwhile, he wasn't even there. I think that's what Puyi says in the interrogation room. He's like, Mr. Johnston wasn't even involved in my life at that point. Like I didn't seen him in 10 years.
Yeah.
How would he even know that? I thought it was a surprising betrayal.
Yeah.
So there are some surprising moments and character bits in this movie, even if they're not necessarily, at least to me, interesting or juicy or impactful. Like, not that it's
Yeah.
not interesting, it's just like the dialogue is very bland, the acting is overall very bland. Like there was nothing like very sharp or witty or things that would normally hook me in and keep me interested in a movie. It didn't
Yeah.
have any of those trimmings.
Yeah, so Puyi, he fires all his people basically, and he's in the Forbidden City alone. Eventually,
He's he's forced out. He doesn't even get to leave on his own volition.
right. Isn't it like the Chinese military is like, hey, they're the
We're
ones
basically
kicking
taking
him
the
out, right?
Forbidden City. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he kind of gets allied with the Japanese because they're like, hey, well, actually, like,
We're starting something. We got this little startup actually going on. We got this territory in China that you could be the emperor of. It's going to be cool. It's going to be hip.
yeah.
And that's basically what he does.
And they did, yeah, like you said earlier, they just use him as like a puppet.
Yeah.
And he's sort of tangentially responsible for war crimes.
Uh-oh. Whoops.
How did this remind you of Oppenheimer? What were you going to say about the Oppenheimer thing I said earlier?
Oh, I just think that if you're I don't know how historically accurate Oppenheimer was. I think maybe we touched on it when we talked about Oppenheimer, that it was maybe like,
I think it's pretty accurate.
yeah, close, but maybe like missing some things or details were askew.
Yeah.
But I think the way that Christopher Nolan approached the psychology of Oppenheimer was so interesting. Like the way that that he showed how the atomic bomb haunted him, and potential minor spoilers for Oppenheimer, but when he sees like the stands shaking and like hears people screaming and like the ears ringing, like I think there's so many audiovisual tricks that he employs that really hammer home his trauma. Whereas I feel like I'm not fully seeing the psyche of Puyi as the Last Emperor.
That's fair. I get that. It's not really like a subjective movie from Puyi's perspective. It's more of, it feels a little bit more objective and like kind of omniscient.
And if you're going to be objective, you should be accurate. I do find it interesting at the very end when he is freed from his prison, right? It's a prison.
Yeah, he's there for like 10 years or something.
Yeah. He's finally let go. And then his overall interaction with the Mao Zedong Communist China parade. Because it's like he's finally got a glimpse of like, this is what power really is. Like people like just, or maybe at least that's what I think. Because he's seeing like, his face everywhere, and the camera really focuses on it. I get the sense that he's processing like how did this guy get to be who he is? Like think about how drastic their lives are. And, he seems to be so revered and feared by so many different people that are on the outside of Forbidden City. And then he gives the kid a cricket.
To me, that movie that the final scene kind of hammers home what I think the movie's about, which is like, the kid's like, who the fuck? Hey, you're not supposed to, like, the throne that he used to sit on is literally behind like a little rope because it's like a museum now. Like his house is,
in
his
his
old
lifetime
house is a museum.
Yeah. He's
And
like, I used to live here.
He lived there like 40 years ago.
Yeah. That has to be kind of wild.
Yeah, it's nuts.
And how's that is that the same cricket you think that his tutor gave him all those years ago?
That feels like a little magical element just to be like,
okay.
Well, it's sort of like the cricket's still there, but the throne that he sat in is empty, like he isn't sitting in it anymore. I don't know, there's something there. There's something in the sauce there that's like kind of about the passage of time. And
I'm thinking Super Cricket.
I'm thinking Super Cricket too. I was going to say that actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the kid, he gives the cricket thing to the kid. The kid opens it up. He sees the cricket. And I would have squished the cricket. I think it's gross. I think it's too big, and I don't want it crawling anywhere near me. But
It was very large.
the kid really likes it. And then he looks up and is like, he's gonna be like, "Hey, Mister."
Yeah.
He's like a little newsy kid.
He is a little newsy, yeah, for sure.
He looks up and then Puyi is gone. He vanished.
Didn't they say he died that day or something crazy like that? A tour comes in and is like, he died today. I don't know.
No.
You know?
I think what the tour, at least to me, I think what the tour scene is supposed to be is like, that's actually present day. That's like the movie came out, 87 or whatever. So it's like it's supposed to be 87, this tour group. It's like all of a sudden we jump 20 more years and now this tour group's coming in.
Okay. That makes sense.
But yeah, Puyi, he did die when he was, I think, like 65? 60, he was only 61. Jesus.
Really?
Yeah, he died in 1967.
Too much breast milk.
It's just crazy how much like shit happens in his lifetime. I think that's another thing. Like,
I think it's crazy how little shit happens in his lifetime.
that too. I guess that too.
God bless him.
God bless them.
God fucking bless that man.
We here at Oscar Wieners support The Last Emperor.
Yes.
Any final thoughts on The Last Emperor?
I'll give one more quick shout out to the soundtrack and the score because it is really good. Shout out to Ryuichi. That's pretty much all I got to say. I think this is a watchable movie. It is rather long, and I really can't think of any instance where I'll ever be watching it again. Like, there's no scenario where it's like, I'm in the mood for Last Emperor tonight.
I know what you mean, but actually I can kind of see myself like being in the mood for this one just because like I kind of love I want every movie to be about this. How like we don't matter. Passage of time is fucking existentially horrifying.
Yeah. I hear you. I just think it could have been done in a more interesting way.
That's fair. Ander.
So,
would you like to hear the other nominees for 1988?
You betcha.
First up, we have another James L. Brooks joint. We talked about his first movie, Terms of Endearment.
Oh, that's him.
Yeah, this is his second film. It's also a perfect masterpiece, and everybody should see it. It is Broadcast News.
Boring name.
Good name, actually.
All right.
Basket Case Network news producer Jane Craig, played by Holly Hunter.
Great description.
Falls for new reporter Tom Grunick, played by William Hurt, a pretty boy who represents the trend towards entertainment news she despises. Aaron Altman, a talented but plain correspondent, played by Albert Brooks, carries an unrequited torch for Jane. Sparks fly between the three as the network prepares for big changes, and both the news and Jane must decide between style and substance.
Okay.
It is one of the greatest romantic comedies of all time. It is a perfect film.
I've never heard of it once in my life.
I think you'd like it. It's fun. It's funny. It's hot. It's sexy.
Oh,
it's clever. It's smart.
No breastfeeding.
There is a really intense breastfeeding sequence.
Okay.
Well, it's over the film an X rating by the MPAA. But nonetheless, a great film.
Okay.
And next up, another sex movie.
No way.
We have Fatal Attraction.
Nice.
Directed by Adrian Lin. And it's about a married man's one-night stand that comes back to haunt him when that lover begins to stalk him and his family.
Whoa. That sounds intense.
Never seen it. I think it's,
is it a horse?
Huh?
The lover is it a horse?
It is a horse. Next up we have Hope and Glory.
Never heard
of this movie either. It's directed by John Borman.
Boring.
A middle-aged man recalls his childhood growing up in and around London during World War II.
That's it?
That's it.
That sounds fucking bad for a description.
There's a review by Sean Baker on Letterboxd, director of Anora, who seems to think this movie is quite good.
All right. Shout out.
That's the Sean Baker seal of approval.
Well, I haven't seen Anora yet, so we'll wait and see, Sean.
And finally, we have another Norman Jewison joint.
Cool.
It is Moonstruck, starring Cher and Nicolas Cage.
Huh?
Yeah.
All right.
It's about 37-year-old Italian-American widow Loretta Castorini, who believes she is unlucky in love and so accepts a marriage proposal from her boyfriend Johnny, even though she doesn't love him. When she meets his estranged younger brother Ronnie, an emotional and passionate man, she finds herself drawn to him. She tries to resist.
Ronnie and Ronnie?
Yeah, Ronnie.
Okay.
Ronnie and Johnny.
Fine. Go on.
She tries to resist, but Ronnie, who blames his brother for the loss of his hand, didn't expect that, has no scruples about aggressively pursuing her while Johnny's out of the country. As Loretta falls for Ronnie, she learns that she's not the only one in her family with a secret romance.
What?
I hear this movie.
I gotta watch this. This sounds
rips, fucks, slaps, and owns.
Sounds fantastic. I might give the Oscar to this posthumously.
Got it.
After everyone involved is deceased, I'll give it the Oscar.
Do you think Last Emperor is Best Picture worthy?
In a weird way, a weird, sick, twisted way, I do. Even though I don't, I do lament its lack of historical accuracy, but it's got the makings of an Oscar winner. It's got the visuals, every frame a painting or whatever the hell, and looks good, sounds good, sure. And I haven't seen anything else on the nominee list, so barring my review on Moonstruck, I'll give it to this.
Got it. I also think it's Best Picture worthy. I just think it's a great movie. I think it has a reputation of being kind of the boring Oscar winner. And I think some of the things you said probably would confirm that for certain people who've also seen this movie. That being said, I would have to give it to Broadcast News, which is probably one of my favorite movies of all time. Sorry.
Okay, fair enough. Great transition, because it turns out what you say doesn't mean shit. What I say doesn't mean it means far less, frankly. What matters is the will, the opinion of the people of the internet. Would you like to hear some reviews that I found?
Yeah. Love it. I'd love to.
Give me the name of your favorite newscaster.
It's gotta be who's like the worst guy on Fox News, Jesse something, where he just like says fake stuff and people are like, God, he's really telling the truth. What's his name?
Jesse something. You talking about Tucker Carlson?
He's another one who can get fucked, but whatever.
This is
Tucker.
All right, this is coming to us from Tucker.
Tucker Farderson. How about that?
Tucker Farderson says 1 star for The Last Emperor. Breaking news. Peter O'Toole admitted to intensive care after sustaining extreme injuries to his vertebrae, resulting from carrying this snooze fest of a film on his shoulders. Sadly enough, he was only in it for maybe 30 minutes of its almost 3-hour runtime. Good Lord, this was meaningless.
That's the point.
The point is that it's meaningless?
Yes.
So it should be told in an interesting way. Like, yes, life is meaningless, but Tree of Life is an interesting movie about fucking dinosaurs and shit. You know what I'm saying? I didn't see one dinosaur or jellyfish or whatever the fuck in this movie.
That's fair. I didn't see a fucking amoeba at all.
No, not one. That being said, give me the name of an amoeba.
It's gotta be James Cord.
James Cord says, actually, I'm going to read this person's real name because it's very silly, and it's Reed Thimple. So shout out to Reed Thimple. And I don't know what the hell he's talking about, but he gave this 0.5 star. This gave me flashbacks to when I pretended to be a panda and manipulated little Al to try and steal the country bear fortune. I'm a different man.
What?
I'm a different man now. Let me finish. And I hate that this movie made me think of the past. Also, Big Al ditched me and sat next to Shaker and Brad Coop. Why? Do I smell or something? Nothing makes sense with the big old bear.
Okay.
Don't know what any of that meant, but shout out to you, Reed. Keep on doing what you do. Love you, baby. Give me the name of somebody whose name is Brian.
Brian.
Brian says 2 stars. I was looking forward to a movie about a boy emperor. Imagine my surprise when that only lasted 5 minutes and there was still 2.5 hours left.
Sucks.
I did think the boy emperor part was fun.
Yeah.
He's just being silly.
Yeah. Running around.
That's all I got.
All right. Thanks for those.
You're welcome.
In the meantime,
Fucker.
what?
Sorry, no. Go ahead.
What's gotten into you?
No, just got a little stir crazy.
Next week, we're going to talk about. We're going to do It Happened One Night from 1934.
This one's a bit notorious, is it not?
It's a very famous movie, I think. I've never seen it. It's Frank Capra again.
Wow. He's balling.
Yeah, it's on Tubi, so don't spend any money, please.
Nice. Thank God for Tubi is all. I was going to delete the app today, but I didn't.
For fucking Tubi. Saving us all some cash.
Yes.
But until next time, if you ever find yourself the last emperor of a probably the biggest country in the world,
Yeah.
or at least the most densely populated country in the world, what I want you to do.
And again, this applies to a lot of people out there.
Yeah, it applies to most people.
Yeah.
So if you ever find yourself in those very normal set of circumstances, and you're having trouble shitting because you're so stressed from being the last emperor,
Probably true.
I want you to mash up, get a hot dog, boil it for, I don't know, like 5 minutes,
Okay.
and then mash it up.
Ew.
Into a kind of curd.
Yeah.
And I want you to eat that for 3 to 5 business days.
Long time.
Then you'll shit smooth for weeks.
Great.
Until
I'll
the
do
stress
it.
gets to you again, and then you have to do it all over. But at least you have a remedy.
To eat a blended hot dog for 3 to 5
Mashed
days.
hot dog, not a blender.
Sorry.
What is
Not a
this?
puree. Thought it was a puree. Yeah, sorry.
Jesus Christ.
My bad.
It'll work wonders for you and yours.
Your skin will look great.
Your skin looks so good. Yeah, so we'll see you next week. Bye bye.
1, 2, 3, 4. These boys only want the best stuff. They want the cream of the crop. They don't want none of that microwave shit. They want the shit that bops. Oscar bait, black and white. Maybe something French. If it's got more than one explosion, honey, put that shit on the bench. Oscar Wieners. Oscar Wieners. Oscar Wieners. These boys are the Oscar Wieners. Oscar Wieners.
On my birthday, no less.
What?
I said I'm drinking whiskey.
No, you didn't. You didn't say that.
Well, I am.